So we need to be more authentic with each other.
Whole life, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Christ, Jesus, the great physician. And he was healed, and now
It's really time to reconnect with your family.
All about life, health, and healing hope.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Healing Hope from the Kettering Health Network. Today, Lonnie is joined by two guests. David Vandenberg will discuss spiritual care in a hospital setting, and Dr. Brian Schwartz will share some incredible success stories from his experiences praying with patients. And later, we'll learn how to take better care of your eyes. But first, here's Lonnie Melashenko and Dr. Becky Wong.
Thank you for joining us on Healing Hope today. And my co-host is Dr. Rebecca Wong. We're going to be talking today about spiritual care in a hospital setting. And the whole hospital environment is kind of foreign territory to many people. They don't even know what to do or how they can participate in the care of that patient, because personal relationships are important, aren't they?
Very important. How are we dealing with their emotions? How are we dealing with their relationships with their physicians? Because that makes a big difference.
So relationships, it might be with the person who's a family member. Maybe they've just had a big argument, or somebody had a slugfest and they're there and they're not sure they want them to visit.
We have to be sensitive to that, and that's where oftentimes a really caring nurse, a physician, will sense this and call the chaplain and say, look, for this patient, we really need to have you come and help with a family conference.
And really the doctors, you, and the nurses and the skilled professionals, they don't realize the power and the authority that they carry when that patient is there and they have nowhere to turn and they're not sure they want family. They don't want to see their chaplain or their rabbi. That medical professional, from a faith-based hospital orientation, where all those who are part of that, they really can add, they can be the hands and the feet and the mouth and the lips and the eyes and the touch of the great physician himself.
You couldn't have said it better, Lonnie. When you said the hands and feet, when the nurse even comes in to tell the patient, you know, I want to tell you that the vital signs are much better than they were yesterday. Do you want a sleeping pill tonight? No, but you know, my neck hurts from this hospital bed. I'm not used to this kind of pillow. And the nurse says, you know what? Let me just rub your neck a little bit. That kind of healing touch. And then the nurse who herself has a faith can say to the patient, you know, do you mind if I have a good night prayer with you? That can be worth all the tranquilizers and all the pills in the world, that caring touch.
I will never forget my personal experience on an emergency flight landing in Los Angeles. My wife was called by the pilot to pick me up. I was throwing up. I was on the floor in that restroom, and a young physician from UC, University of California, she sat beside me and she simply put her hand on mine as I was sitting there. I was a basket case. But that touch, I wish I knew who she was. She was an angel as far as I was concerned. But the healing touch and the presence of these doctors and nurses, if they would only realize it's much beyond medicine and prescriptions and a hypodermic, whatever.
Well, Lonnie, do you remember when Jeannie had the car accident?
I do.
And the first thing that happened, I got that call and they said, Jeannie's in the emergency room. And I knew you were new to Kettering. So I dropped everything, went to the emergency room, and you weren't there, and I went into the room where she was, and I just touched Jeannie's hand, and I said, you're going to be okay. Because an emergency room is a scary place, and especially when you're new to that area, and you know, it was just nice. And then you came and we prayed together, and she was okay. Lonnie, today we're going to talk more about this. We've got a special treat for our viewers today. In 2 previous episodes, we discussed the role of spirituality in healthcare and praying with patients. On these 2 topics, there was way too much to fit into one single episode. So we're going to hear some additional information, first from David Vandenberg, an Associate Professor of Religion at Kettering College of Medical Arts. As he spoke with Lonnie, they discussed having a spiritual care plan in a hospital setting.
Now, doctor, how does recognizing the spiritual component of care affect the care plan for a patient?
Profoundly. You know, one of the ways, of course, that doctors try to find out what's wrong with a patient is by listening to their story. You know, what's your presenting complaint? You know, when did this start? But they also recognize that it's important to listen to the patient's emotional history and their family history and their social history. So these psychosocial factors are very, very important and have been increasingly recognized as a part of the patient's story and important for diagnosis and treatment. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, it was 1977 when Dr. George Engel, who was a faculty member, physician teaching on the faculty of the medical school at the University of Rochester, published a seminal article in the journal Science arguing for a new medical model. And his argument was we need to move away from the biomedical model to a biopsychosocial medical model. His argument was that treating patients only on the basis of science is not the best kind of treatment. We need to be listening to their stories, we need to understand their social settings, we need to understand the psychological aspects of their health and their illness.
Are hospitals picking this up?
Yes, it is typical nowadays for psychosocial issues to be a part of the patient's story and to be documented in the patient's chart. And the Joint Commission for the Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations requires this kind of work from those hospitals that want to be documented by JCAHO.
What does it mean to have this? How do you create a spiritual care plan?
Well, it's to recognize, first of all, that whenever somebody has an issue of illness or accident, it raises existential questions for them. And ultimately, these are profoundly spiritual questions. Will I die? Is it serious? Am I going to get well? Will I be able to resume my life? Will I still be the same person I was before? And even with minor injuries, you know, we all know the stories of the person who went into the hospital for a sore throat and was diagnosed with lung cancer or something, you know. And so even seemingly minor things raise in people's minds the questions of mortality and meaning and purpose, why I'm here and where I'm going. So these are profoundly spiritual issues, and it's well to recognize that they are there. This is, again, the reason why the Joint Commission requires that hospitals do spiritual assessments on patients as they come into the hospital to find out what role spiritual things play in their lives, what resources they have that can be brought to bear on their getting well, and those sorts of issues. So we try to teach students, first of all, a spiritual assessment plan to inquire whether God, faith, religion has any significance for the patient or not. If they say no, then the question that we'd want to ask is, how do you cope with difficult times? What gets you through when times are hard? If they say, yes, God is important to me, or faith is important, or religion is important, or my church is important, then the next thing we want to know is just what role does it play in your life? How important is it to you?
So you use that as a building block for them then?
We want to inquire about, do they have a faith community that they interact with? People who are active members of a church, for example, may be able to get to their chemotherapy treatments because somebody's there to drive them, whereas somebody who doesn't have a church community or a synagogue community or something like that may not be able to get there. People who belong to a faith community often will have people who will check up on them, who will bring them a casserole, who will come and see how they're doing. We also want to find out how they would like their caregivers to address their spiritual needs. And so out of all of this, a spiritual care plan can be created in the same way that a psychosocial care plan can be created.
Getting back to the word holistic.
That's right. The model that we're trying to work on here is called a bio-psychosocial spiritual model. And it recognizes the totality of the human being as a physical being with anatomy and physiology, as a psychological being with mind, as an emotional being, as a social being with connections with family and friends and work in society, but also as a spiritual being.
Bringing those two words together for this television show, healing hope.
That's right.
We'll have more Healing Hope after this brief break.
Over a century ago, a brilliant young Dayton inventor had a vision for the future.
By itself.
You know,
fearless Kettering guy just might change the world.
Today, that same spirit lives on at the Kettering Medical Center Network, bringing the best in medical technology from around the world home to Dayton. With that kind of vision for the future, what might tomorrow bring?
Those guys just might change the world.
You can only imagine. The Kettering Network, for life.
If I'm going to be a healthcare provider and if people are going to come to me and trust me, then I want to give them the best care that I possibly can.
I love it. It's great. The classroom sizes are awesome. You get that personal one-on-one time, even in class.
They taught well, and I learned well, and they really truly cared.
The philosophy of Kettering College of Medical Arts is such that our view of who we are as people means that when we care for others, we are doing the work of God. We are God's hands.
It was just so surreal to me because I didn't ever think I had a heart problem. You know, here I was 47 and they said that, you know, I probably had about a 1% chance of making it. And I did. Kettering is known as the heart hospital, and when I see Kettering, I think that's where I got my second chance, and it feels like home.
For more of the story, go to experiencekettering.com. Kettering, for life.
I knew it was serious the whole time, but it was still just unreal, and you never really soaked it in. So I was hearing all this stuff, and it sounded really bad. You can't even tell that she went through such a crisis because she's back to normal, and they said she'll eventually feel better than she did before. So I don't think they realized that they not only saved my mom, but it helped save my family.
For more of the story, go to experiencekettering.com. Kettering, for life.
Welcome back to Healing Hope. Now we join Lonnie Melashenko and Dr. Brian Schwartz as they discuss praying with patients.
When I got here to Kettering myself, not too many months ago, I went into a patient's room and I decided I would like to reach out to him and have prayer with him. And he told me about meeting you. And
Wow.
you did something for him.
Mm-hmm.
You evidently calmed his fears and told him about the procedure, but then you offered to, well, what happened? You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that case. So, like many patients, he was very, very anxious. Just been told that he was having a heart attack, that he could very possibly die. He'd been very ill even before with other problems. And so in some respects, he and his family thought this must certainly be the end. But I remember just offering, as I do, to offer to have a prayer with him and just the effect that that had on both him and his family. It's a sudden peace. They had total confidence all of a sudden in my abilities to see him through that. And just the feeling that God was going to see both of us through that procedure, I think, gave him great hope.
I didn't know you. I did not know who had done this prayer. But what he said to me was, "Sir, I'm honored to meet you. I've heard you. I've, over the years, watched your television program. But what's more impressive to me is that it was a God thing that I came here. When that physician didn't know who I was, offered prayer for me, all of my fears were assuaged. I don't care what happens to me now. It's okay. God brought me here." So it makes a difference. You provide healing hope to them.
They have hope.
Prayer.
That's right.
So what do you do if your patients aren't Christians? Is anybody ever offended by your offer to pray with them?
Well, you know, I at first thought I better just limit this to Christians because I'm a Christian doctor. I don't know how to pray a Hindu prayer or a Jewish prayer. But I became convicted that, you know what, I want to reach all my patients and let them know that I'm open to talking to them about spiritual things. I actually met with a Jewish gentleman who's a rabbi who, unbeknownst to me at the time, but he was very hesitant to have a pacemaker put in, didn't want to have the procedure. My partner had recommended that he have it. I came in, talked to him. He was a little bit hesitant, and at the end, I do what I always do. One of the things I offer to do is have a prayer with my patients. Is that something that you'd appreciate? He just took my hand and says, well, absolutely. And I've gotten to know this gentleman quite well. We actually now go out to eat and discuss spiritual things over dinner twice a year.
Wow.
It's really, we have a good mutual relationship, and it's only because I was open to bringing up that subject. A couple years later, he told my wife that, you know what I liked about your husband is he came in and the very first thing he said was, be happy to have a prayer with you. And in my mind, I thought, praise God, I've found a doctor who doesn't think he's God.
Wow.
And so he was very open to it.
You know,
and I still pray the way I pray. I don't know how to pray any other way.
In a very real way, doctor, you perform open heart surgery, don't you?
I want to reach the heart in 2 ways.
Tell us about one of the more remarkable incidences where someone really was radically transformed as a result of prayer.
Yeah, one gentleman that comes to my mind I would have thought was a very unlikely candidate to make a significant change. A gentleman who rode motorcycles, weighed over 300 pounds, really hadn't been taking care of himself, was a chain smoker, didn't exercise at all. He got scared because of an episode of chest pain while heading off to work in Cincinnati. Got referred to my office, and it turned out it wasn't his heart. But I used that opportunity to talk to him about the lifestyle changes that he needed to make, that encouraged him to stop smoking, to really radically change his diet, start trying to get his weight down and exercise.
So you told him he was heading down the wrong road.
I told him if it wasn't a heart attack this time, it wasn't long before it was going to be. At the end of the conversation, like I always do, I just said, look, I believe that God can give you the power to make this change in your life, and I'd like to have a prayer with you to ask him to do that. And he got tears in his eyes and just thanked me, wouldn't let me go afterwards. Just thought that was a powerful change. But I didn't think that much about it until 6 months later when he came back into our office for a follow-up appointment. My nurse came to me and said, so-and-so did really well with their bariatric surgery.
Wow.
Which is a gastric bypass.
Yes, yes.
And I looked at the chart and I looked at her and I said, I don't think he had gastric bypass.
He'd lost a lot of weight?
He'd lost over 150 pounds.
Wow.
And so I went into the room and I said, did you have surgery? And he said, no, you prayed with me. And I went home, and as a result of that, I decided I needed to make some changes. He quit smoking, he became a vegetarian. Instead of the motorcycle, he'd been going to the gym, and he'd really gotten serious about making those changes. And he told me it was because of the power of prayer. 3 years later, my wife and I went to a Home-A-Rama event here in the area. A Home-A-Rama is where builders will develop a model home, and they'll have 10 of them in a row. This gentleman opened the door, and he's supposed to say, welcome to such and such a house. It's on the market for $1.2 million, built by this builder. And instead, he opened the door and said, that's my doctor. This is the doctor who prayed with me and got me to lose 150 pounds.
Wow.
And in front of all these people here, he was testifying about the power of prayer and what a change that made in his life.
That is remarkable. And it all goes to God, the great physician. The glory is to him, really.
Absolutely. It's God working through physicians, but it's his power that makes that change in their lives.
Trust in divine power. Faith makes a difference.
It absolutely does.
We'll have more Healing Hope after this brief break.
They actually do care about your progress. I know, when I heard that I said, yeah, okay, you know, you hear that from a lot of schools. No, really, we do care about your success.
When I go home, I talk about Kettering because I've had such a great experience here.
If you have a commitment to going into healthcare, you're going to get there in a setting where you know your fellow students and where you know your teachers, and it's going to make you someone who I think is going to be really highly valued in the workplace.
Never again just take anything, the perfect pregnancy, for granted, because you just never know. We were 4 weeks to the day early. I immediately was just like, we can't do this. We're not ready, you know, he's not ready. The special attention there was from the get-go. And so I knew he was going to be in good hands because it was their child, in a sense, that the comfort was just there.
For more of the story, go to experiencekettering.com.
He smiles all the time. He's just, you know, thriving. Loves his mommy and daddy.
It was just so surreal to me because I didn't ever think I had a heart problem. You know, here I was 47 and they said that, you know, I probably had about a 1% chance of making it. And I did. Kettering is known as the heart hospital, and when I see Kettering, I think that's where I got my second chance, and it feels like home.
For more of the story, go to experiencekettering.com. Kettering for life.
I knew it was serious the whole time, but it was still just unreal, and you never really soaked it in. So I was hearing all this stuff, and it sounded really bad. I You can't even tell that she went through such a crisis because she's back to normal. They said she'll eventually feel better than she did before. So I don't think they realize that they not only saved my mom, but it helped save my family.
For more of the story, go to experiencekettering.com. Kettering for life.
Sight is a precious gift from God, which we often take for granted until we lose it or have eye problems. So today we're going to talk about a few things you can do to keep your eyesight as good as possible for as long as possible. First of all, know your family's eye history. Make sure to discuss it with your physician if you find out that someone in your immediate family has either had glaucoma, cataracts, or macular degeneration at a young age. If they have, an eye exam for you may be in order. Look cool. Wear sunglasses. Well, all right, it doesn't really matter if they are cool sunglasses, but if you want to protect your eyes, look for shades that block 99 to 100% of both UVA and UVB radiation. You don't have to look cool all the time. Wear protective eyewear. Whether you're playing sports such as racquetball, or sawing wood in your workshop, or working in any kind of environment that requires eye protection, wear these safety glasses with pride. It's especially important that they have protection on the side because flying objects can ruin your eyesight for life in a split second. It's not a small matter. So educate yourself on the risks of whatever activity you're performing and take out the appropriate protection. Remember what Mom told you. Eat your carrots. She was really onto something because there are special foods that are very beneficial for your eye health. Any food high in beta-carotene is particularly important. You may know these as the yellow-orange foods. Not only carrots, but squash, sweet potatoes, and cantaloupe. I just found out that there are some other green foods that are also high in beta-carotene as well. Dark leafy greens such as spinach, kale, or collard greens. Give your eyes a break. Focusing on one thing for a long time, such as staring at a computer screen, can really cause eye strain. Or even watching TV can cause eye fatigue and cause you to forget to blink often enough. So try the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look away about 20 feet in front of you for about 20 seconds. Or you could even close your eyes. That feels good. But don't look away until we finish with this report. If you wear contact lenses, it is very important that you wash your hands before you put them in, because you may get infection if you're not careful with cleansing the bacteria and viruses from your hands and being sure that the lenses are properly soaked in the disinfecting solution. Even with all these special tips, it's important to remember that you must take care of your health in general. Eat right, get enough sleep, and exercise, and that will lead to eye health, especially because diabetes is the leading cause of legal blindness in the United States. Half of diabetics are undiagnosed, so if you have a family history of diabetes or are overweight, be sure to see your physician because your eyes may show early signs of diabetes even though you haven't been diagnosed. Today we've told you several things you need to do, but here's one thing not to do: smoke. Everyone knows about smoking's effects on your lungs and heart, but did you know that smoking also increases your risk of developing age-related macular degeneration, cataracts, and optic nerve damage, all of which can lead to blindness? Finally, in closing, let's talk about the signs and symptoms that you need to know that could be indicators of serious eye problems. First, red or painful eyes. Second, dry eyes. Next, excessive tearing. And finally, abrupt changes in your sight of any kind, such as blurriness or visual loss, are very serious potentially. So if you have any of these symptoms, go see your eye doctor promptly. For Healing Hope, I'm Dr. Becky Wong.
Your sins are forgiven, the great physician said to the paralyzed young man who'd been lowered through the roof by his friends in search of healing. His words meant hope, not only for that particular individual, but for the entire community, because they addressed a cultural paradigm which still laid blame from God on any individual suffering from disease. Jesus forever shattered that myth. These days, the discussion about illness takes a different turn, as is reflected by the frequent attention that the debate between God and science receives. I just have to shake my head sometimes. When you live and work in the healthcare environment, you see firsthand the impossibility of removing one from the other. God's incredible design, the human body, is beyond comprehension, and yet we strive to understand it to assist in defying aging and illness. But the two worlds, scientific understanding and the mystery of God's love, are uniquely and mysteriously inseparable. At Kettering Health Network, we are committed to furthering our scientific understanding of the human body, and we strive to provide the latest in high-tech care. But what would the latest technology be without intercessory prayer? Science now endorses prayer as a mysterious powerhouse in the healing process. You know, there's electricity and power when surgeons, nurses, chaplains, food service leadership, and even the accounting staff take time to pray for our patients by name. Nehemiah beautifully embodied that mysterious mix of reliance on God and personal discipline. Today's healthcare is challenged with ever-increasing demands and rigorous overhaul. But at Kettering, we don't see a divide between scientific developments and the undeniable power of God. We see them as intersecting, and our job is to get as much done as we can in His name. Thanks for joining us today. For Kettering Health Network, I'm Lonnie Melashenko.